Hello, it's Mrs. Nelson, and I'm back with part 2 of the book we've been reading. This is going to be chapters 4, 5, and 6. This is for Ashley Small, Ashley Tall, Brushes, and Basketball. It's by Michelle Jakubowski, and this is chapters 4, 5, and 6. As Lee and Ash walked back to their moms, they tried to think of another activity they could do together. "I'm sorry basketball didn't work," Lee said. Ash had been frustrated, but she wasn't mad at Lee. "It's okay," she said. As they walked, the girls came upon a large bulletin board filled with flyers. One of the flyers caught Lee's attention. She pointed to it and said, "Hey, look at this one. It's for something called Cookies and Canvas." Ash was confused. Cookies and Canvas? What is that about? Lee read the flyer and grew more excited. "A local art studio is going to have a painting class for kids," she said. "Each person gets their own canvas and takes home her own painting." Lee loved art. She looked hopefully at Ash and said, "Maybe painting could be our activity." Ash didn't like cookies or art very much, but since they hadn't come up with any other ideas, she said, "Sure, why not?" It was the afternoon of the painting class, and Lee was excited. She didn't like to get messy, so she wore her art smock over her clothes. She asked her mom if they could go early so she could find a spot near the front. Ash arrived just as the class was starting. She didn't have a seat at first, which made her grumpy. When she finally found one, she slumped onto it and almost knocked over her canvas. Their teacher was named Janet. "We are going to have so much fun today," Janet told the class. She explained that she'd paint along on her canvas. She'd share what colors and brushes to use. "Your painting doesn't have to look exactly like mine," Janet said. "My picture is an example. Feel free to paint your canvas however you'd like." As Janet spoke, Lee organized her art supplies. She liked to keep her work area neat. She noticed that Ash's brushes were pointing in different directions. "You may want to face them all the same way," Lee whispered. "It makes them easier to grab while you're working." Ash nodded, but didn't fix her brushes. So she was listening closely to Janet. She wanted to make sure she painted her picture just right. Finally, it was time for them to start painting. They were going to paint a field of flowers. Lee followed along, but chose different colors and shapes for her flowers. She was having a great time. Ash was not having a great time. Her painting didn't look like Janet's, and that bothered her. The more she tried to fix it, the worse it got. Lee saw Ash frowning. "What's wrong?" she asked. "My painting is awful," Ash said. "No, it's not," Lee told her. "It looks really good." Ash reached across her work area for a bigger brush. She knocked over the cup of water she was using to clean her brushes. The water spilled over onto Lee's work area, and it made a mess. "Oh," Lee cried. She began to clean her mess. "I'm sorry," Ash said. "It's okay," Lee said. She wished that Ash had fixed her brushes like she had suggested. Ash was frustrated. She wanted her painting to look like Janet's, and it looked completely different. After they had finished cleaning up their mess, Ash dipped a big brush into the yellow paint. As she raised the brush, Lee said, "That's too much paint." But it was too late. As Ash slapped the brush on the canvas, paint splattered everywhere. Drops of it landed on Lee's painting and both of their faces. Ash felt awful. She didn't want Lee to be mad at her. She looked over at Lee to apologize. When they saw how funny they each looked with paint on their faces, they burst out laughing. Chapter 5. Snacks with dads. Lee loved to run errands with her dad. When they finished what they needed to do, they always stopped at their favorite coffee shop for a treat. A few days ago, after a messy painting class, Lee and her dad were finishing their list of things to do. As they got out of the car, Lee heard someone calling her name. Lee! It was Ash. She and her dad were just leaving the hardware store next to the coffee shop. Ash, Lee cheered. We're going to get a treat at the coffee shop. Want to join us? Ash looked at her dad. Can we? Sounds good, Mr. Sanchez said with a smile. I could use some coffee. The girls were so happy to see each other. They found a table while their dads ordered. Lee always got a hot chocolate and a chocolate chip muffin. Ash got cranberry juice and a blueberry muffin. As they enjoyed their yummy snacks, the girls told their dads about how hard it was to find an activity to do together. Lee ended up creating a new game called Keep Away Basketball. Ash laughed. I don't think she'd be allowed to play that way on my team. Painting didn't work either, Lee told them. When we left, we looked like we had giant yellow freckles. Ash and Lee laughed. Hot chocolate almost came out of Lee's nose. After they'd realized that painting wasn't going to be their activity, they had fun at the class. They signed each other's paintings and agreed to hang them in their bedrooms. It sure would be nice for you girls to find something to do together, Mr. Taylor said. I got an idea, said Mr. Sanchez. When I was at the community center, I saw a sign for a gymnastics class. That might be fun. Ash and Lee both shook their heads. We tried a sport, Lee said. It didn't work out so well. Gymnastics is so much more than a sport, Mr. Taylor said. Lee, I think you'd really like the tumbling and the balance beam. It's a lot of dancing. I'm not a good dancer, Ash said, shaking her head. Lee said, I've got 2 left feet. Mr. Sanchez chuckled. But you are a good athlete. I could see you enjoying the uneven bars or the vault. They both require a lot of strength and attention. The girls looked at each other. They were not sure about gymnastics. Why don't you give it a try, Mr. Sanchez suggested. You can take 1 class, and if you don't like it, we won't sign up for any more. Ash leaned over and whispered to Lee, What do you think? Lee shrugged. I'll do it if you do it. Ash sat back and said to their dads, We'll do it. Chapter 6. Together Time. Ash and Lee were nervous on the day of their first gymnastics class. As they walked into the gym, they saw the different equipment and colorful mats. There were lots of other kids in the class. Some were doing flips and cartwheels on the mats. They already looked like gymnasts. The instructor called everyone over to the mat for stretching. They formed a big circle. Ash and Lee stood next to each other. Each had stretched. One of the instructors explained that the class would be split into 2 groups. She said that they would be working on 2 stations that day, tumbling and uneven bars. Ash and Lee locked arms. They did not want to be separated. Thankfully, they ended up in the same group. Their group headed over to the tumbling mat. The instructor explained that they would be doing cartwheels. She showed them how to plant their hands on the ground while kicking their feet into the air. When she was done, she said they would each try a cartwheel. We can do that, Ash said to Lee. She went to get in line. When she noticed Lee wasn't coming with her, she stopped. What's wrong? Lee didn't move. I don't want to do it, she said. Why not? Ash asked. You can do a cartwheel. Lee looked scared. I don't want to do it in front of everyone. You dance in front of people all the time. I've seen you do it, Ash said. Yes, but that's after a lot of practice. I've never done cartwheels like that before, Lee said. Ash thought for a moment. Then she said, I'll go first. Watch, it'll be fine. Ashlee and Lee got in line. When it was Ash's turn, she did 3 cartwheels. On the first, she rotated too much and fell down. On the second, she tipped over halfway through. Ash was determined to get it right. By the last one, she did a perfect cartwheel. Ash's cartwheels had looked sort of funny. Lee was happy to see that no one laughed. Ash stood at the other end of the mat. She gave Lee a big thumbs up and a smile. Lee took a deep breath. Then she did 3 perfect cartwheels with very little help from the instructor. "You did it," Ash said. "That was fun," Lee exclaimed. They high-fived and got back in line. They ended up having a great time tumbling. When they switched to bars, it was Ash's turn to be nervous. "They're so high," she said to Lee. "Not really," Lee told her. "Maybe not for you," Ash replied. "You can do this. I've seen you swing from the top of the jungle gym 1,000,000 times," Lee said. "Okay," Ash said, but she was still nervous. Ash walked over to the bars. The instructor helped her up to the top bar. At first, she was worried about falling. She looked down and saw Lee smiling and waving. Ash relaxed a little. The instructor showed her how to use her legs to swing back and forth. Once she got going, she had so much fun. The bars were definitely going to be her favorite. After class, Ash and Lee met their dads outside the gym. "Well?" asked Mr. Taylor. Ash and Lee looked at each other. "I thought it was fun," said Lee. "Yeah, we even got to do cartwheels," Ash said. Lee nodded. She said, "But I think the best part about it is that we are going to hang out together." Ash hugged her friend and said, "I agree." And that is the end of our first book about Ashlee Small and Ashlee Tall. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care.